Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Excited to chat with you all today about what's on admissions directors' minds in 2023. So the reason this topic came about was we just had a conference last week with all the admissions directors from all of the top schools, which was really helpful and insightful. And I'd like to share some of the learnings with you all. Some of them maybe can't share exactly publicly, but some of them we can. So I'd like to go through everything and show you, what everyone is thinking. So for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Scott Edinburgh, the founder of Personal MBA Coach. We were top ranked on Poets Quants and some other sites previous years. I've been a presenter at the annual GMAT conference. As a company, we have a 96% success rate. Although last year, pretty much everybody got in. We got $10 million in scholarships. We do admissions consulting, right? So boutique, family owned. I run the company with my sister. And what's really different about working with a company like ours is everybody could have one-on-one support, either for myself or a top former admissions director. We don't have any junior consultants. Things are really centralized at the company, so people aren't running around sort of doing their own work on the side. Everything is quite closely tied. We'll talk more about that as we get on. And you can have clients to network with at all the top schools and a pretty structured project management system. So I'll tell you a little bit about us. I have 2 slides about us. You'll hear from a former client. And then we'll get into the meat of the presentation for what our admissions director is thinking about. I went to MIT for undergrad, studied economics and business at Sloan. I was a teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses as an undergrad. Then I worked at Deloitte in consulting, did mostly mergers and acquisitions work across a number of different industries, and went to Wharton for the MBA. I took a couple summers of economics courses when I was in high school at Wharton, liked the curriculum, and went back. My thought was to do real estate. And started this company actually when I was a student, helped my friends get into schools. They all got into their top choice schools. We expanded from there, and now here we are 16 years later. I'm on the board of directors for AGAC. That's the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, and that's where we learned a lot of this insight from the conference from last week. I have MJ Shores on my team, who's a former Wharton and UCLA admissions director. We also have a former Columbia director who's an advisor. We just hired a former Kellogg admissions director. We have former MIT Sloan admissions reader on the team as well. So a few different M7 schools represented. And I run the company with my sister, Erin, who's a former Forte scholar, runs our editing and all processes sort of behind the scenes, and went to Yale for the MBA with a pretty large scholarship. So we help through all the parts of the process. If you want help figuring out what your story should be, right? Is this now the time for you? Should you plan ahead? Or we have this early planning offering where we can help you to improve yourself between now and when you're ready to apply. We'll go through the story development, all the essays. We have essay guides for all the schools. I'll talk more about this at the end of the presentation as well. And have some top editors. All of our editors are PhDs or masters from Ivy League schools. And we have former M7 and top 10 interviewers. So once you do interview prep, you'll have that done by someone who used to actually be an interviewer. So that's a bit about us, more about us later. But everybody's happy, everybody gets it, and we do tutoring too. So for those looking for tutoring, GMAT, jury, and executive assessment tutoring, we are nearly full with tutoring, honestly, at this point. But we do have a few more slots for anyone who's interested. Then we'll be on a waiting list for a short period of time, and then things will probably open back up. So a couple-minute video from a former client, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation.
Scott and his team were really incredible to work with. Coming into business school applications, I knew I wanted to work with a consultant because I come from a tech background, and I don't know many others applying to business schools. After meeting with a couple of other top consultants, I decided to work with Scott and his team for a couple of different reasons. First, they provide extremely comprehensive and accessible support. They had a great track record with M7 programs, and just speaking with him, I felt like it was more of a genuine conversation, and his advice was really solid, practical, and also personal. Scott was really able to guide me through the entire admissions process, from selecting my schools to crafting my story to even negotiating for a greater financial package at the end. Coming into this, I was the least confident in my essay work and interview prep. And of the 7 schools I applied to, I received interviews from 6 and was admitted to all 6. I think the quality of the editing and interview prep process really speaks for itself there. For me, I really appreciated that Scott, with his strong background in business school admissions, initially helped me craft my story, but the editing was entirely left to a professional editor. This really felt like the best of both worlds, where my content was not only tailored to the admissions committee, but also presented in the best possible way. His team also followed a similar approach for interview prep, where I was able to experience mock interviews with individuals who actually used to conduct interviews at my target schools. Again, having an expert for this was just extremely helpful, and I was able to ace all of my interviews. Results-wise, my top choice was always MIT Sloan, and I will be attending MIT Sloan this fall. But outside of that, I was also admitted to Columbia Business School ED, Wharton, and I additionally was admitted to Kellogg, Ross, and Stern, all with significant financial support. As someone who was initially super unfamiliar with the business school admissions process, I consider this application season a really huge success for me. And I really credit much of that to Scott and his team. I knew I wanted to give him my all and just do it all in one go, and his team really helped me maximize my chances of achieving my goals. Overall, I highly recommend working with Scott and his team if you're in the market for an accessible, knowledgeable, and supportive admissions consultant.
Okay, great. So what's on the admissions director's mind? This is a picture from a panel from last week. So we'll go over some of these thoughts. Here's another picture. Okay, takeaways, right? The Supreme Court ruling, it's top of mind for folks. So for those of you not familiar, the Supreme Court in the U.S. is deciding whether it's illegal or legal to ask affirmative action questions on an application. That might change some of the dynamics of the application process. So we have to wait to see what comes of that. Application process, right? It might evolve given AI. What does that mean? Look, this year, nothing's going to change, but will essays remain for all the schools in the coming years? Let's see. There is an M7 school that's considering maybe going away with some of the essays. And so that's sort of like TBD. But as of now, no real changes for this year. Right? Authenticity remains key. And this is, I wouldn't say this is new, right? You always want to be authentic in the process. But what came out of some of these conversations, and sometimes it was, chatting with an admissions director over drinks at an event where we learned it's just really sick of hearing this created content that doesn't sound too genuine or too real, right? And so going back to the roots to say, hey, I'm a real person, right? These are real people, really nice people that do this job because they love it and they love helping people and they want to read real stories. Authentic stories. So don't try too hard, right? Don't try to edit an essay 17 times and it's going to be really cookie cutter and really polished and very, very perfect. And you send it to 10 friends. Like that's the way to not get it, right? Be real, right? These are humans. Schools are on the road. So for some schools that care about engagement and visiting, you should be visiting. Joint degrees and specialized MBAs, they're growing, right? So it's no secret that this is not the most competitive year ever to be applying to business school. And so application numbers are not the highest. And so schools are looking to grow in other areas. So there's different types of programming that are out there. I'm sure you're learning about some of that through this MBA Spotlight event. The other thing that I would say is video essays. Those are important. If you can't perform well on a video, talk to me, right? I'm not perfect on video. I'm sure you can give me some feedback right now, but it's important. You'll have to use videos for interviews for schools. You might have to use videos for interviews for jobs, right? And so that's going to become more and more important. So these are some questions that came out of this. Should I use ChatGPT to write my essays? Okay, no, right? That's just no, right? That's the answer. Don't do it. Now, if you think you might do it anyway, at the beginning, okay, maybe some ideas or how do I think about diversity or something, and you have them think through it. But if they're doing a lot of work, it's just not going to be helpful. It's, I would say, somewhat easy to know whether someone wrote an essay on their own or whether they used a tool. And we're all looking to develop tools to try to catch some of these tools, but it's like, what's going to develop faster, the tool or the tool that's trying to catch the tool, right? So who knows? But if you do, your essays will be less personal and less developed, right? Especially for some of these more personal narratives, right? The whole reason we're here as consultants is we help you to develop your best self and to, make sure that you are being unique and genuine and real throughout the process. And if it's a tool that's going to write this, the authenticity just really isn't going to be there. Now, fundamentally, they are against honor codes at some schools. Now, schools are playing catch up with this, right? So every school is a little bit different as far as what their policies are. I won't go over them now. It's a process that's going to evolve. And some schools are allowing the use of AI to some extent, but we don't think it's a good idea. I think you'll have your best essays just not using them at all. Do I need to overcome trauma to write a compelling essay, right? Sometimes we hear that. I haven't done this, right? I don't have anything bad that's happened to me. Directors are really growing tired of this, right? So only so many essays we can read about that have really bad things that happen to someone. And then you sit there and you think, should I care, right? Not to be too direct, but why should an admissions director care about the negative thing that happened to you unless that led to you doing something positive from that thing, right? So you could have like the worst thing in the world happen to you, yet you don't do something to help other people. Or you could have something minor that happened to you, not a big deal, but then you start an organization, you're guiding others, you're creating nonprofits. Okay, that person's going to get in better, right? Because they've done more things. It's not just what's happened to you. So why is the story relevant, right? And focus on your personal story. And we won't get into personal story. That's a whole nother webinar. If you want to learn more, right, you're just here to absorb content, visit our website, personalmbacoach.com. We have a lot of material, a lot of webinars, downloadables, guides. You can see me talk. Okay, we're wearing different shirts or the same shirt. I don't know. And you can learn a lot about like developing yourself, developing your story, and thinking about schools. We have a whole webinar just on schools. What are the differences across all the schools? Should you plan to take the GMAT Focus this year, right? Sometimes that's a question people have. So probably not, right? That's the first answer. It's probably not the right approach, but it might be for you for some schools. I think at this point, right, if you're thinking about applying in round one, GMAT Focus won't be available. So the first test dates won't be until Q4. What does that mean? We also don't know yet. Some schools won't even accept it this year. So let's think about the main GMAT at this point. If you struggle with the GMAT, I talked to someone today that, great applicant, like we had a really good conversation. She was great. In case you're here, welcome. Test score just wasn't great. And so what are we going to do? We might waive the test. We might wait until round 2 for the GMAT Focus for some schools. So in some cases, maybe the Focus is the right approach. But at this point, I wouldn't really put a lot of effort in it at this stage. What's the best way to engage with top programs, right? First of all, make an effort, okay? It's very clear to tell if you're going to sign up for a webinar, you're going to go, your camera will be off, you won't be asking questions. And that doesn't really count, right? Show that you're engaged, show that you're caring. Visiting is not a must, but it depends on the situation, right? It depends where you are. If you're in New York City and you're looking to apply to Columbia and you don't visit, don't bother submitting your application, right? That's just a waste of your time. Now, if you are around the world and you're looking to apply to a school that's, a 9-hour flight away from you, you don't have to get a ticket to get there, right? So be logical as far as like where it makes sense to visit and where it doesn't make sense. Talk to students. They have these student ambassadors. Certain schools have these. Certain schools don't. So if you try to find the Stanford student ambassadors, they don't have them. So don't try. Don't reach out and talk to Stanford students. There aren't that many of them, and there are way more of you, and so it just wouldn't make sense. But a school like Columbia, MIT, right? They have these ambassadors. They want to see engagement. And don't ask questions that you can answer online, right? So if it's a silly question, how many students go into PE, or how likely is it for me to get into this school, or what do you think I need to do to break into banking? Like those are not questions that admissions directors want to be asked. So what really happens behind the admissions curtain, right? So first of all, who is on the admissions committee? And I'm going to breeze through this. Keep your questions. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. If I can't get the questions, you can reach out later and ask any questions. If you're interested in hiring a consultant, okay, you like what you hear, you want to learn more about us, visit our website, personalmbacoach.com. We do offer consultations for those looking to hire us. We do not offer just free profile discussions, but if you have the budget and you're looking to hire a consultant, we'd love to have a chat with you. So who's on the admissions committee? It's going to vary by school. Sometimes you have faculty, you have deans, sometimes you have students, you might have career services. Admissions officers with varied backgrounds would be on here. You might have trained readers, right? So outside readers that are not staff, but they're just like 1099 contractors that do a little bit of work here and there. They might read the applications. You might have second-year students. So it's going to be a varied mix of who's actually on the committee, and that's important to know. You take a school like Stanford, you might have one person read the application once before you get invited to interview. You might not think that happens, but sometimes that happens. Booth, same thing, right? One review before interview. Or another school, you might have multiple different times where the application is reviewed. So how are they sorted, right? This is going to vary based on the school. You might weed out the weak applicants, right? And more on that coming. You might sort applicants by stats, right? Reviewing the highest stats first. Everybody gets a review, but some get a better review than others. If you have a 510 GMAT and you're applying, to Wharton, there's only so much time they're going to spend looking at your application, right? They might read the application front to back, in no particular order, and in some cases rolling, right? Although fewer and fewer programs are rolling now. They're going to scan them for like storyline and qualifications, prioritizing their review accordingly. So there's some kind of sorting mechanism that happens. How much time is spent? Sometimes people say, Scott, how long is someone going to actually spend to read an application? Nobody's going to say this publicly, but sort of on the DL, right? It might be a certain number of minutes, right? Maybe it's like a half hour plus. Really depends on the strength of the application and whether it's a first review or a subsequent review. If everything looks really good and they're very interested in you and they're engaged, okay, they might take longer. If things aren't looking so great, they will read it, but might not spend 40 minutes to read an application if the stats just don't really line up. How many people review? Right, average number of reviews, 1 to 6 or more. That's going to vary. And also, if you're borderline, you're sent to committee. So it could be you're invited to interview, then you interview, then you come back, and then let's go to committee and talk about everybody. And one interesting thing is about the bucket. Some people say, oh, they're going to be bucketed. So if I'm an Indian male engineer, or if I'm, a white female consultant, I'm only going to be looked at against others. Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, they only can take so many people that look like you, but you're actually not bucketed. You are read as you. And of course, they have to think about how many people they want to take in each category. But it's not as if you're only read with other other people like you for all schools. Now, some schools do bucket by industry, and all the private equity folks are read by private equity reader, right? And so like Harvard's one that does that. Stanford does that to some extent. So what are admissions committee members evaluating? So regardless of the makeup, they want to look at 5 things. One is ability to handle the academic rigor. And I won't read all these bullets, but you have to be smart to do well, or you have to appear smart to do well and get in. They don't want to take you if they think that you're not going to succeed. So that's part of it, is like, are the scores high enough so that you can succeed? Part of the academics is, okay, there are more people with the 750 than the school could take, so let's take the higher people, better than others. If your academics are not good, it's okay. People get in with low GPAs through a lot of these schools. Maybe take some quant courses, right? Maybe try to get a really high score. Hire us for tutoring. We can help you with the test score. If we get you a higher test score, you're more likely to offset a lower GPA. So then the quality of professional experience, right, and uniqueness of perspective. So they want to see the achievements, right? What's the scope? What's the scale of your achievements? What does it mean? Everyone has done well in their own right, but what does that really mean? How are you comparing to others? Are you doing things that are outside of your core responsibilities at work? And are these things that admissions directors are frankly going to be interested in reading about? Professional awareness, this is important, right? More and more, it's important for you to do the right thing at work. And so what does this mean, right? What are the impacts of your firm profitability, ROI, market competitiveness, social bent, right? We should be adding, social to this. Capacity for personal growth, ability to figure out what your flaws are, leadership. Have you been exposed to leaders? Do you want to get exposed to leaders, right? There's a lot of different things that they're looking at. This uniqueness piece, it's kind of a tricky one because you might say, well, am I unique? Am I not unique? We wrote here distinctive insights to share on teams and in the class. That's what it is, right? It doesn't mean you have to be different from everybody in the world. Your skin color has to be different. You have to look different, or you have to have worked at the most unique job, right? That's not good or bad. What's good is that you have insights that are going to be distinct that you can share with the class. And that's why they can't take a whole class full of 780, investment bankers, because you're just not going to get the most diverse perspectives. Next is clarity of career vision, right? This is super important. And we have webinars where all we talk about is like creating the goals and the essays. And that's not this, but we do have other webinars where we talk about essays and how to answer all the essays. If you want that, stay tuned, sign up for our newsletter. Clear short and long-term goals, right? So role, function, industry, maybe potential firms, right? Being very, very clear. This isn't the time to say, I want to go to business school to figure out what I can do later. And I love to work in technology, but I'm not sure how. And I want Berkeley and Stanford to help me to clarify that vision for me, right? That's not the approach here. The goal should be tied to past work experience and really reflects like well-reasoned rationale. There should be something in your mind to think, okay, here's why this is the right path for me. Here's what I've done. Here's what I want to learn. this is what I want to do going forward in my business school plans. I'm going to drive change, right? So not just like execute, but really have a plan and drive change and understand the broader world that we're in. So if you write a goal in 1970 and you write a goal in 2008 and you write a goal in 2019, you write a goal today, like those goals should be different just based on the time that you're writing it. And you should think about that, right? So if you're not considering broader economic, tech trends, political, if you're not considering that in your vision at all, then you're probably missing something. And again, right, vision of industry changes you want to advance and how you're going to execute them. So this is a lot of stuff, but that's what we're here for, to help you to kind of unpack this. So reason for pursuing the MBA, right? Maybe continued growth and learning, if there's some kind of career plateau or acceleration, if there's certain gaps that you have and you want to identify what those gaps are and therefore how you're going to sort of close these gaps with the MBA, right? That's important. So it's not just to get ahead. If you're a consultant, and if I give this talk in person, which, I will often, it's like, raise your hand if you're a consultant, and everybody raises their hand. It's like, okay, so we know you're going to get an MBA, but why is it the right fit for you? Next is potential fit with the program, right? So are you going to align the academic offerings, your knowledge desired, cultural fit? Schools are different, applicants are different. To say every applicant can thrive in every school is not true, right? So you're just going to be better at some schools than others based on a variety of different things. And you want to understand that. You want to see what the culture is like and how you can fit into that culture. The knowledge of the program, that varies based on the school, more on that in a minute. But really genuine enthusiasm, right? And a track record to contributing. So this is where the extracurriculars come into play. We have a whole package. It's called the Early MBA Planning Package. We sell out of it every month. And it's a way to offer career guidance and advice for how you can improve yourself between now and when you submit the applications. It doesn't matter when you're going to submit it. You could be submitting it later this year. You could be submitting it in a year from now, 2 years from now. If you don't have great extracurricular leadership, if you don't have impact on an organization, come to us. We'll help you to define that. Right? We'll create opportunities with you to try to show them this history of contribution, because that's something that the schools are looking for. Now, schools are placing varying value on demonstrated interest. Note, this is not, no school authorized this. This is just off the cuff, sort of my sense of this based on everything I've seen over 16 years of doing this. Look, Stanford does not have a formal way of evaluating interest. They don't say if you visit campus, 5% more likelihood of getting in. Harvard doesn't track how many lectures you sit in on or anything like that. Kellogg is in this list, but they actually are kind of looking at it. It's not formal, but sort of a little bit informal. Now, schools that definitely very formally look at it. Columbia, top of the list, right? They ask you in the application for the names of the people you talked to, when you visited, like all that's really tracked. Columbia, MIT, right, and on down the list. So certain schools are somewhere in the middle where they're not on either side, because it's like, take Wharton, right? Wharton's on either list. They don't formally evaluate it. It's not like you have to go in order to get in, but it is something that is, somewhat helpful to show interest in the school and maybe to learn so that you can, do things better as you further engage in the program. Okay, just checking to see if any questions. Yeah, so any questions, feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll get to all the questions at the end, but feel free to ask questions and we're happy to answer. So next is, how is the interview used? Right, so this is important, interviewing. One, you want to assess candidates' personality, right, and interpersonal skills. So what are they going to be like? Are they going to be good? Are they going to be fun people to work with? Are they going to be engaging? How will they interact with others? How will they study with other students? The goal is to pressure test your goals, right? Figure out if the goals are feasible. Is the candidate coachable? So maybe in an essay, you write, I'd like to do venture capital. I'd like to be a partner, right? And you're not along that path, right? VC is a hard goal. We tell most people not to write about venture capital, right? And for some people, that's the right path, but probably not for most. Let's see if they're coachable. Let's talk about the goals, right? Let's pressure test. And if it seems like they might be flexible and they might be more interested in doing something else and makes sense, okay, well, then they're coachable. That's great. Let's evaluate interest in the program, right? How excited are they? Do they really know about the school? Are they interested? Even if you take a school that doesn't ask about the school and doesn't ask for your goals in the application, in the interview, that's the way that they can evaluate your interest in the program. And if you don't seem that dynamic, right, then you might not get in. Next is to predict future performance. So find out how you'll perform in front of an interviewer, right? So if I interview with an admissions director and I do well, I'm more likely to do well in a job interview, right? Is the candidate hireable, right? So that's really important. And next is just discuss information that's not in the application, right? Maybe something's left out. Perhaps the essays are a little bit too narrow and admissions directors think, all right, maybe we'll add another question next year. But this year I didn't really get it. A lot of the personal things about this candidate, I want the interview to tell me. So what happens after a bad interview experience, right? Usually it means you won't get it. It's rare to blow the interview and still get an acceptance offer. It happens, but it's not super common. Interview is important. You might get rejected. You might get waitlisted. Maybe the interview is an outlier, especially if it's with an alum. If the interview is not great, it's with an alum, it might be able to be discounted a little bit more easily. If you interview with an admissions director and you blow it, odds are you're not going to be getting it. Now, what happens after a good interview? Well, step one is maybe the application goes to another evaluator, right? Sometimes there are additional blind reads that happen where someone doesn't have the first evaluator's notes. That way we really make sure that two different people like this candidate. You might go to committee, right? So it could go through the entire board. If borderline candidates come, then there's a conversation and you might, quote, have to be fought for, right? So we have admissions directors on our team that tell you all kinds of fun stories where they fought for candidates and, the team didn't want them. They said, this is the right person. And, they do it. So that's what happens sometimes in committee. Things to keep in mind, right? Sometimes people will be passed on as clear admits without a conversation, or sometimes clear denies without a conversation, right? It just depends. In some cases, the borderline candidates get discussed. So decisions are either released rolling or a specified date. So Columbia is still using rolling for January term. You may or may not have heard they got rid of rolling decisions for the regular term, and they got rid of the early decisions. So it's now just rounds. Round one is still the best time. And I was talking with Claire about this. Claire's the new head of admissions at Columbia. It just makes sense, right? Other schools are doing rounds, and so now they're coming on board and doing the rounds. But people are ready to apply to Columbia early, and so round one is still going to be the best time for you to submit it. If you're denied, you have to wait until the next year to apply. Some schools offer feedback, most do not. So if you ask a school for feedback and you don't get a response, it's not that they're not interested, it's just that they're probably not staffed in order to do that. So most schools won't give feedback. And then waitlist, right? If you get on a waitlist, that's actually good, right? Congratulations if you get on a waitlist. It means they didn't reject you. It's very easy to click reject, right? It takes 2 seconds. So if you're waitlisted, they have some interest in you. It's possible to get off a waitlist, maybe raise a score, maybe try to get a promotion, maybe try to demonstrate more interest in the school, or, they might just not have enough seats for you. So things to think about later, but waitlists are definitely not, not a bad thing to sort of think about. So again, a little bit about us, for those that didn't come earlier, family operated boutique, run the company with my sister. We have a few former admissions directors from top schools. As we go through this process, and a little bit of scholarships, so we got 10 million in scholarships last year. That was up from 6.5 the year before. So I think it means two things. One, we did really well as a company, but probably not 50% better than the prior year. Also, schools are giving more money for certain candidates in certain situations. And so just something to think about. If you think that this MBA is expensive, you're not sure if you want to do it, you might be going for free. We have, I think it was 5 candidates that not only got full rides, but got paid money to go to school. We're talking $20,000 cash, some even health insurance paid for. So think about it. Not at Harvard. Harvard's never going to pay for your health insurance to go. So how can we help, right? You can go through tutoring, right? So GMAT and GRE tutoring. We have some of the best tutors in the industry. We have in-house software that you can use. And I'm going to sit on, we can sit on this side. In-house software that you can use to guide through the sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers, full-length exams. We spend some time teaching concepts, teacher to student, helping you to think through how to answer questions more efficiently, effectively. We have a small team of tutors. They're great, all in-house, and everybody does well and loves the process. We can figure out your stories. What are you about, right? How to tell your goals, how to think through your overall personal stories. We have essay guides for all the schools so you can see what success looks like from people who've gotten in. A lot of these guides are written by former admissions directors. We go through the school selection, the editing, the resumes. I won't go through the whole pitch today, but if you are interested in working with us, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help and discuss further. So right now, I'll probably go back and sit on, I'll probably sit on this slide. And while we sit here, we can go to some questions. Up here and go to some questions. All right, so go to the questions. Feel free to type in any questions that you have into I think it's the comments section within YouTube. If you're on YouTube, there's no question that's not the right question. If I don't like it, I'll skip it. Otherwise, please feel free to ask. And again, if you're interested in working with us, then reach out, personalmbacoach.com, and we'd be happy to have a consultation to chat through things further. And also like this video, right? So like the video, subscribe to the GMAT Club YouTube. If you don't like the video, you don't have to like it, but if you like it, that's great. It allows us to be featured more. So, and to give us some feedback. So here's a question: how will AdCom be able to make out the difference between the AI written essay and a standard one? Well, first of all, if you've read essays for long enough, you can tell what's a heartfelt written essay. We actually did some exercises with the admissions instructors where we had ChatGPT write an essay, and we shared an essay that was written by ChatGPT and one that was written not by it, and they had to sort of determine. And of course, okay, it's just a one-off example, so who knows how perfect it was, but it was pretty easy to tell. It just seems too generic, right? If a computer's writing an essay, it's not the same thing as a human writing it. So I think you'll be able to tell, and I don't think it's risk that's worth taking, in my opinion. Okay, so if I visit a school over the summer when there are no admissions events, is there a way to show that I attended? Should I plan visits around when I can go in person to events? So that's a good question. So there might still be events in the summer, so definitely look into this. You can reach out and let the school know, right? Admissions directors still work. It's not summer vacation for most people. So you can let them know. Again, it depends on the school, right? Some schools care about demonstrated interest. Some schools don't. But you can definitely, reach out and let a school know that you're coming to campus. And if they're interested, like Columbia, MIT, a lot of the ones that care about a demonstrated interest, right, they will be around. And you can make an appointment to chat at some point. Okay, so let's see. Is it too late to sign up as a client if one is targeting round one? Sahil, no, it's not too late. So we'd love to hear from you. Yeah, definitely reach out, and we'd be happy to schedule a consultation. I would say sooner than later, right? Just because time is going, but we still take people. And what it is there'll be periods of time where we're on wait list, right? And like can't work with Scott, can't work with team because we're sort of on a wait list. But there are also periods of time where we say, hey, if it's so late, we can't do 8 schools with you if you sign up on August 10th for round one. That's crazy town. But you can still figure out the strategy. And maybe it's like, all right, we're going to throw in 1 school in round 1, the rest in round 2. At this point, it's June 14th now. You're going to be watching this later. So it'll be another day, hopefully past June 14th. If not, someone screwed up somewhere. Where we'll take you now for whatever you want, right? So as many schools as you need. And as the weeks go on, that number is just going to be condensed a little bit. Okay, so there are often questions that come up and sort of a general common question about recommender strategy, right? Who to ask, when to ask, what to do with that whole process, right? So I'll walk through the recommender strategy a little bit here. So when it comes to recommenders, you want to ask someone who's going to write a really good letter, right? That's number one. The letter should be good. If it's not amazing, I don't care what the title is. I don't care what the CEO. It has to be really, really good, right? So that's number one. 2, it has to be specific. So it's not just to say that Scott was the best consultant that I've ever seen, and he should have the world at his feet, which was not me, by the way. Has to be specific. Why was Scott a good consultant? So I got a letter written from a North America head of a major consulting firm for a client, and I had to go back to this person and say, we need a better letter. Wasn't the most comfortable exchange, but I did it, and it worked out. Client ended up getting into Harvard, but the first letter, it just wasn't detailed enough, right? It was too high level. It was clear that they were way too removed, and in order to write a good letter, right, they needed to engage with the applicant more, to write more specific things about what this applicant was doing, right? So that was an example where maybe the title was a little bit too high, right? Going back, hindsight, probably should have asked somebody with a lower title. So specific, should be realistic, right? Should have some honest honesty, right? And should be detailed, right? So that's how you think about rec letters. Don't go back to college. Some people think about college. That's not the right approach. And now's the time to ask, right? It's mid-June or later. Ask now if you're looking at round 2. You don't want to wait too long. People go on vacation. There's holidays. There's work projects. So you want to give people time to sort of think through this process. Now, if you don't want to ask your direct manager, let's say there's layoffs and you were just spared and you're afraid about getting fired, that's okay. You don't have to ask someone that you're not comfortable asking. Then you just write in a little optional essay why they weren't the right person to ask and, who might be a better person to ask, essentially. When it comes to the schools and the number of schools, you want to think through your strategy, right? If you are going to be going to school next year, that's your plan. You're quitting work. They already know you need to get in, right? That's a different strategy than, hey, I'm making good money. I like my job. I don't need to leave. But if it's the right opportunity, I will leave for that right opportunity. On average, applicants apply to like 6 or 7 schools. So typically you want to be sort of in that range, 5, 6, 7, 8, something kind of like that. But it's different for everybody, If you are young and you say, hey, I definitely need to go to school, but I don't need to go this year, then maybe you apply to a shorter list of schools and you expand it later. If you're sort of on the other end of the curve, right? 5 years is sort of the top of the bell curve. If you're 6, 7, 8, and you're like, hey, I don't want to wait any longer, then maybe we're applying to more schools. Also, think about the different structures. You can have full-time, part-time, MBA. I don't know anything about anyone who's watching this, right? But you might have an executive MBA, might have a full-time executive, you might have a full-time MBA. So different ways of getting the education. And depending on where you are in your career, you might think about, one way versus another. When it comes to the essays and the topics and the release and everything, so we often have early access to essays from schools. So one of the benefits of working with us. But at least at this point in mid-June, a lot of the schools have released their essays. So you won't be slowed down by the essay release. You can definitely get started now with the applications and kind of go school by school. Now, you always want to start with doing goals. For us, the first thing we do is a little goal statement essay. So it's a 200-word essay. We want to make sure that what you're writing is very clear, it's specific, and realistic, achievable, sort of all at the same time. So start with the goals and then kind of go school by school. I would leave the tough personal questions to later. If you want to write what matters most to you and why, you sit down on day 1 to try to write that. That might be a little bit challenging. So that's some advice. Look, I would say think through this process, think through the strategy, think through the recommenders, the school selection. If you want to do schools in the U.S. and you want to do schools in Europe, we play a lot in U.S. and Europe, a little bit in Canada, not so much in Asia. So we do a lot of work in the European schools. If you want to apply to London Business School, we can get you a priority profile review just by nature of working with us, right? So certain schools where it's going to be more important to think through why you want to go and to communicate that. If you're in the US or if you're in India or if you're wherever and you're not in Europe, you want to apply to Europe, first thing that's on the minds of an admissions director in Europe, will the applicant come, right? Do they want to go to the US? So many schools are in the US. You want to show them that this is the right place, right? Just like for Columbia, you want to show them that New York is the right place. For Europe, definitely the bar is a little bit higher to show them I'm actually going to go and move to London. And so demonstrate interest, right? Talk to students, visit. So those are some tips. Definitely have a lot more tips as the time goes on. We can tell you everything. I think I probably want to talk about a couple different topics now, just to sort of keep giving advice. And feel free to keep asking questions if you'd like. But the first topic is going to be the splitting across the rounds, right? Round 1 versus round 2. How to think about that? Well, my advice is round 1 all the way. Unless you're watching this video and it's like October 1st, then you missed round 1. So then my advice is going to change for you to round 2. But at least at this point, or for those of you thinking about starting the process in the summer, round 1 is better. They haven't taken anybody. So the odds of them saying, I already have another Scott, I don't need one more. We definitely don't need one more Scott. But let's say we already have one. The odds are lower, right? So round 1 is better for that reason. The other thing is, at least at this point in this year, 2023, we're entering into a recession. Maybe, who knows, right? What's going to happen? But applicant numbers are not super high now. And the prediction is that those numbers will probably just rise as the time goes. So, the sooner the better, and try to get as many in as round 1, as many in round 1 as you can. The other thing to think about, and please like the video if you like this, please click like. The other thing to think about is round one, round two differential, right, based on the test score. So let's say you have a 720 GMAT and it's September 1st, and you really think you can get to a 740 or 750 by round two. Well, in that case, all bets off. Don't submit your 720. If you're getting a 750 in the second round, that's going to be better, right? So you have to think about everything I'm saying with a grain of salt based on yourself and your situation. Also, what background are you coming from? Are you an overrepresented consultant, right? In which case, a lot of you might be applying in round one. Are you in military and you're deployed, right? I work with a lot of military folks, a lot of family businesses, a lot of young startups, educators, so a variety of backgrounds. If you're in the military, maybe you can't get back in time, right? Maybe round one is just too tricky. And in that case, it's fine to do round two. Let's see if there are any other questions. What's something that you want to avoid? So something that you want to avoid in this process is telling your story, right, when the school doesn't ask for it. And so if you're applying to a school and, let's take an essay about the goals. So they say, what are your goals? Why do you want the school to help you to get there? And, that's the essay, right? So let's not talk about grandma and talk about where you're from and talk about this trauma that you overcome. Answer the question on goals. Now, conversely, if you take a school that does not ask about goals, right? They probably don't ask about goals because they don't want it. It's easy to write a question to ask you about your goals. So if a school purposefully does not ask about your post-MBA goals, they do not ask why you want to go to that school, do not write about it. So if you're applying to Harvard and you have this whole essay drafted about your life's hopes and dreams and why Harvard's the right place for you and what you want to do post-MBA and how Harvard will help you to get there and what you're going to do to drive success in your career, you've already lost, right? Even before they start reading anything, right? Just because that's not what they want. Right? So you have to think about what are the schools looking for, what are they asking, and based on that, try to craft the message accordingly. So I'm probably going to pause here and say best of luck to everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Visit our website, www.personalmbacoach.com, if you're looking for help. Like this video, and feel free to enjoy all the other sessions. Thank you, everyone. Best of luck.